Welcome, and of course we'll start with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I'm going to go ahead and see about the screen share. One moment. I have to, 1 second here. That should do it. And here we are. So we are almost finished with the Parsha of Bamidbar, of Numbers. So continuing this organization of the camp. And we were reading this interesting relationship of the Levites to the firstborn of Israelites. And we're going to now go on specifically with the tasks of carrying the various parts of the tabernacle assigned to each Levitical family. So here we are. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe ve'el Aharon le'mor. Hashem spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, Naso et rosh b'nei kahat. So this word naso usually means to lift up, to separate, to be partial. And so it would seem that maybe translating it as take into account, right? Take into account. The head, literally it means, but I think the whole thing is that the phrase is naso rosh. That means take into account. So the idea of rosh head, remember we also had gulgulet, which means skull literally, but again, it means individual, right? So take into account the children of Kahat, mitoch b'nei Yisrael, from among the children of Levi, the mishpachotam, according to their veit avotam, according to their paternal families, according to their paternal houses, literally. Let's take a look here. Naso et rosh. Sorry. Mane mehem et hareuyim. You should count of them those that are appropriate or are suitable, the avodat masa, for the work of porterage, of carrying things. Vehem mi ben shloshim, and that would be from the age of 30, ad ben chamishim, to the age of 50 shana, years. V'hapachot mishloshim, and one who is less than 30, lo nitmale kocho, his strength has not fully developed. Mikan amru, and for this reason they said, and this is in Pirkei Avot, ben shloshim lekoach, one who is 30 years old is for strength. In other words, the stages of human development. V'hayoter al ben chamishim, and as for one who is more than 50 years old, machish me'ata, from this point on, his strength weakens. So we're going to see, as this says here, Mi bin shloshim shana v'mala, from 30 years old and upwards, v'ad ben chamishim, we're going to say, of course, chamishim shana, and to the age of 50. This is who you should count. In other words, all those Levites from 30 years old to 50 years old. Kol ba latzava, those who can come to serve, la'asot malacha, to perform labor, ba'ohel moed, with the tent or in the tent of meeting. So the word sava also means army, but you know that sometimes we refer to this army as military service. So that's the same idea here in the Hebrew. Zot avodat b'nei kahat ba'ohel moed. This is the work of the children of Kahat in the tent of meeting. Kodesh HaKodashim has to do with the most sacred objects. Sure, here we go. Kodesh HaKodashim, the most sacred. HaMekudash Shebekulan, the holiest of all the objects in the tabernacle. Aaron, that would be the ark. V'hashulchan, the table for showbread. V'hamenorah, the candlestick. V'hamizbachot, and the altars. V'haparochet, and the cover for the of the Holy of Holies. Uchli sharet, and their service vessels that have to do with those particular objects here. Uva Aaron, so what's going to happen? Uva Aaron uvanav, and Aaron and his sons should come, bin soa hamachane, when the camp is ready to take its journey, at the points of journey of the camp, of the encampment, v'horidu et parochet hamasach, and they should remove the curtain of the covering, meaning the curtain that is covering the entrance to the Holy of Holies. V'chisu ba et aron ha'edut, and they should cover with it the ark of the testimony. Uva Aaron uvanav v'gomer, so Aaron and his sons should come. Yachnisu kol kli v'chli lenarkito, they should take each and every vessel and put it in its case. Hamafurash lo b'parsha zo, which will be explained, specified in this parsha, in this paragraph. V'lo yitzterchu haleviim b'nei kahat, and as for the children of Levi, that is the sons of Kahat, they will not require lo yitzterchu, they will not need to do anything ela laseit, except to carry it. They shouldn't be handling it, putting it into its particular packages, etc., just carrying it. Bin soa hamachaneh, when the encampment journeys, and that is Kesheha'anan mistalek, when the cloud, the pillar of cloud, would remove itself from over the camp, at that point they knew that they had to take their journey onwards. Yes, Lauren.
Just a quick question. What does Bin Soa mean? Because we say Bin Soa Aaron Vayomer Moshe.
Right. So that is spelled differently. This
Okay.
we've got, that is spelled Nun Samach Ayin, with an
Okay.
I at the end, and there's that Bin Soa. See that? And where Naso is with an Aleph. Take a look
Okay.
here. So that's and also with a sin. Right, you notice. So
there it is.
yes.
Okay.
So that's Naso in this sense is to lift up, essentially.
Okay.
Right. But Nasa Rosh is probably the phrase, the idiom that means take into account, or them. That's how we would understand that.
So Bin Soa Aaron Vayomer Moshe, what does that mean?
That means when the ark journeyed.
Oh, that Aaron, right, of course. Okay.
Right. There's some beautiful literary references within the service, within our tefillot, to these particular moments. Let's keep going. Let me make sure. V'natnu alav kisu or tachash, and they should take upon it, or put upon it. That's okay. So after they've covered the ark with the parochet, they should then place upon it kisui or tachash, a covering made out of tachash skin. Ufarsu beged klil tchelet milamala, and over that they should spread a cloth of pure blue, milamala ava, above it, v'samu badav, and they should then place its poles, the staves on either side of it. Let's take sure. Okay. Onwards, the al shulchan hapanim, and on the table, the showbread table, yifresu veget chelet, they should spread over it a cloth of blue, v'natnu alav et haka'arot, and they should place upon it the bowls or the dishes, ve'et hakapot, and the ladles, ve'et haminakiyot, and the minakiyot, it's a little bit of an unusual word, but it refers, as it's understood, to refer to the tubes that were on the showbread table that helped the pans would rest on these tubes and keep one loaf from touching another loaf. So the word naker means to clean, so it would keep those loaves clean. The et kesot hanasech, and it sounds like jugs of libation, because they used to, I believe, pour oil over the bread. But as I had in my note here, Rashi has a different interpretation of this. Belechem atamid alav yiyeh, and the eternal bread should be upon it. In other words, when they moved this, they did not take and when it says tamid here, it means that there always was bread on the table. When they removed the bread, I believe, Erev Shabbat, and replaced it with fresh loaves, but the point was that there always was bread on that table, the implication being that we would always have sustenance, that God would always provide sustenance for the people.
Can I tell you what Chabad translates those nouns as?
Please.
It says they shall place on it the forms, comma, spoons, comma, supports, comma, and covering frames.
It's helpful. I mean, I think what they're doing is they are taking the Rashi and those interpretations of these particular words, and I think it's very helpful. And I'm very glad that you translated it that way. So, yeah, I mean, a ka'ara means some sort of dish, right? So it could be, and they're taking apart, if you can recollect what the showbread table looked like and the different parts. I'm not going to pull it out right this second and take the time to show you, but possibly I'll put something out there in the recording. We'll see. Okay. At any rate, yeah, that certainly describes the various parts of the showbread table. Yeah. All right. Let's take a look at the Rashi. Ka'arot v'chapot kasot umankiot. Right. He takes these various parts. Kfar pirashti. So this is what Rashi says. So the Chabad could be going back as to how Rashi interprets these different parts of the showbread table. He says, I've already explained b'melechet hamishkan. I already explained when it came to the construction of the tabernacle, these parts. And then he takes hanesech, right? He says, hakasui, lashon masach. So it means a covering. He understands nesech as coming from kisui, that it's related to a word that has to do with a covering, a screen of some kind. Asher yusach bahem, with which they are covered. So do you want to go back over how Chabad explains that, Lauren?
On this one, it says from the term masach, a screen, as it is written, with which they are covered, yusach, and that's from Exodus 25:29.
That's the phrase itself. Right?
Yeah, and that's close to the other Exodus where he did all that other stuff.
Right. So what's interesting is that these words have more than one meaning to them. So we're depending on a tradition to help us understand this. Going on, Ufarsu alehem beged tolad shani. And over this, they should spread over them a cloth of crimson yarn, v'chisu oto, and they should cover it, b'michse or tachash. So again, that gets covered with a covering of tachash skin, v'samu et badav, and again, it had poles on either side with which to carry it. They should place the poles. I think we have, let's see, yeah. V'lakchu beged chelet, and they should take a cloth of blue, v'chisu et menorat hamaor, and they should cover the candlestick of illumination, ve'et neroteha, and its lamps, ve'et malkacheha, its tongs, ve'et machtoteha, and its fire pans, ve'et kol klei shamna, and all the vessels of its oil, asher yishartu la bahem, through which they take care, they serve the candlestick. In other words, they take care of the candlestick, service it. Let's take a look. Melkacheha. And he says this word, melkacheha, kemin svat. It is a type of tongue. Shemosech ba. So this should be actually, this is maybe a misprint and should be moshech ba, right? With which he pulls, he tugs at aptila, the wick, the chotzad shirzeh, to whatever side he wants, because they actually laid on their side as they drew up the oil. They didn't, the wicks did not stand erect. They lay on the side. Machtateha, right? So he says, kamin kaf katana, it's like a small spoon, veshuleha pshutim, and its sides are flat, velo skalgalim, or they are not curved. Ve'ela mechitza lefaneha. So I think essentially its sides were square, is what he's saying, so that it looked like a little bit like a shovel. Ve'ela mechitza lefaneha, and in the front part of that spoon, there was no wall at all. Ela mitzideha, but on its sides. Ve'chote ba et deshen, and they raked with it the ash hanerot of the lamps, keshemativan, when they trimmed the lamps. Neroteha, luth, so he's got loose, right? Light, belaz in French, and the Yiddish lampen, lamps. Kshe nitanim bahen hashemen v'haptilot, in which there were these cups at the top of the menorah in which they would pour the oil and place the wicks. V'natnu ota ve'et kol keleha, and they would take it and all its vessels, all the different parts there that were mentioned, el michse or tachash, into a covering of tachash skin, v'natnu al hamot, and again, they should place it on a pole. So it sounds like that it was placed in a type of bag or sack, and then that was suspended on a pole, because the menorah itself didn't have any staves alongside of it. El michse or tachash, so he says, into a covering of a skin of a tachash, and he says kamin martzuf. I'll need some help here, Lauren, if you have the translation there.
I'm looking. So okay, so it says here a type of large sack.
Okay.
And large is in parentheses.
So I could have guessed that, but anyway, it's good to know for sure.
You're usually on track, if not right, when you guess.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to today, but it was a okay, no, right. All right, I'll leave that there. Mm. Going on. We're moving fairly quickly here, as you can see. V'al mizbach hazahav, and on the gold altar, yifresu veget chelet. They should spread over it a cloth of blue, v'chisu oto, and they should cover it, v'michse or tachash, again with a covering of tachash skin. And you notice I'm not translating the word tachash because it sometimes gets translated as dolphin skin. I've even seen I believe, a translation that suggests it was a unicorn of some kind. We're not sure what this animal was. It is interesting that the Aramaic, and we've mentioned this before, here's the Aramaic here, sas gona is the Aramaic translation. And apparently it was some kind of animal, and there's a good reason why it might have been translated as some sort of sea animal. It's not that they were around in the desert, but they could have had these skins, and apparently they were iridescent. And Rashi explains that the Aramaic sas means to be happy, right? To be joyous. And gona, he says, is from a word gavan, which means color. In other words, it would rejoice at its coloration, is how he breaks apart this word. And I would have to say iridescent. So it was whatever this animal was that had an iridescent skin, is how they covered it. Going on. V'lakchu et kol klei hasharet, and they should take all the serving vessels, asher yishartu vam bakodesh, with which they serve in the holy place, v'natnu el beget chelet, and they should put it into a cloth of blue, I'm going to say v'chisu, and they should cover otam b'michse or tachash. No surprise here, and they should cover them with a covering of tachash skin, v'natnu al hamut, and once again, they should place it on a pole. And likewise, we can imagine that this is similar to what they did with the candlestick. The fact that we have these sort of repetitious sentences, I think, is a way of instructions, that it's written in the form of instructions. Okay, et kol klei hasharet asher yishuta bam bakodesh. Clearly, he's quoting now from the verse that all the serving instruments with which they would serve within the holy place, but toch hamishkan. So it says the bakodesh in holiness is how it could be translated, but he's saying what it refers to is inside the tent of meeting, shehu kadosh. That's it, because it is sanctified. Vehen kli hakatort, and specifically, what are we talking about? We're talking about the vessels or the instruments of the incense, shemishartin bahem b'mizbach hapnimi, with which they are able to service the inner altar, that where they brought incense. They would need various implements in which to be able to burn the incense. V'dishnu et hamizbeach, they should clean out the ashes of the altar. This is now ufarsu alav beged argaman. And I'm thinking that here we're talking about the outer altar, that the one where they offered up sacrifices. They should cleanse it, and they should spread over it a cloth of purple. Yes, so Rashi tells us, he clarifies it immediately. V'dishnu et hamizbeach, they should cleanse the altar, mizbach hanachoshet. Here we're talking about the bronze altar, the one that was outside the tent of meeting. V'dishnu, Yitlu et hadeshin me'alav. they should remove the ash that is upon it, ufarsu alav beget argaman, and they should place this cloth of purple, and it says in Yoma, ve'esh she'arda mina shamayim, and this is fascinating. It says the original fire that came down from heaven, revutza tachata beget, it would crouch underneath the cloth, ka'ari, like a lion. So again, this is interesting and imaginative kind of whether it happened or it didn't. I would say that if we take it at face value, of course, somehow there was a fire that was underneath this cloth. It doesn't sound, this is sort of a miraculous issue here. B'sha'at hamasaot, at the time of the journeys. Ve'ena sorafto, and it did not burn it, it didn't singe the cloth. Shahayu kofin alav sachtar, and the reason it didn't do that is they placed a sachtar, that's like a fire, like a brazier, that they placed over it. So, like a big pan with holes in it, shel nechoshet, of bronze. And I think that is where we're going to stop today. So we have a little more to do when we get back to it. All right. I'll stop the share. So this is all descriptive and symbolic, and I hope you find it interesting.
I got a question.
Sure.
The Gershonites, the Kornites, and the Maronites, Levi's sons, they were not supposed to go into the Mishnah or the inner sanctum of the pack. Aaron and his sons had to disassemble everything and cover it and then give it to them.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, yes. One can try and imagine that Aaron and his sons would go in. Now, on a formal ritual level, only the high priest could go in, right, on Yom Kippur.
Yeah, Levi's sons were not supposed to see the actual Mishnah and everything. They were just supposed to carry that and guard it.
Correct. But the priest apparently would go into the Holy of Holies in the process of disassembling it and making it ready for its journey. So
okay, now if they took all the coverings and put them in a cart, there was not labor because the cart was pulled by horses, I suppose. But there was the Mishnah itself, the actual golden Mishnah, was carried by somebody. So that's a lot of labor. They didn't want to put them in the cart. That was, the God said, don't do that. Okay. Is that correct?
Okay, so let me just clarify it. It's somewhat correct. It's not 100%. Okay, all these various parts that we just read were carried by the Kohatites. They put it all on their shoulders and they had to carry it by hand. Now, remember that the Mishkan, the tabernacle, also had boards, these heavy boards that were surrounding it that set it up. Those were put on a cart. They were probably drawn by oxen rather than by horses, Harlan. So I think they used oxen to draw things. And so when it came to the Gershonites and the Merarites, they did carts, but it was for stuff that was quite heavy. And so there was, in fact, a point that I think you're bringing out is that the work of the Kohatites, and there were more children, remember, Kohat had 4 sons, so possibly there were in fact more of them because we saw their numbers, and so they were there to actually carry by hand or on their shoulders those parts that were extremely sacred. So I think what you're bringing out is that there's some symbolism involved in the fact that they had to personally bear it on their shoulders as opposed to putting it on carts. it would still take work. They still had to load it up. They had to lead the oxen properly. I'm sure there was plenty of work involved.
Another thing is the Mishkan in the center of the camp, or is it in the front of the camp when they go to war?
Okay, so when they go to war, they would not be taking the Mishkan with them. If you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant, there were times we did that. I don't know exactly what position it was in. I know that, there's the story in the book of Samuel where the Philistines capture the Ark and stuff like that. So whether the Ark always went with them when they did that, I'm not sure.
Well, if the Ark is with them, they'll win the war. If the Ark is not with them, they lose the war.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say. I would say that if they
Okay.
more if God had commanded them to do it, they would hopefully do it. On the other hand, we read, of course, in Joshua where they lose a battle, and the reason they lose a battle is because somebody did something that he was not supposed to do. That it said, don't take any booty from the spoils of Jericho, and this one person did, and then hid it, and that's what caused the problem. So again, it has a lot to do with how we choose to behave, and not so much, counting on things that get close to, I don't want to say it almost, but that sound a little bit like idols. So,
Okay.
all right. So with that,
Right.